Good morning. Grab your coffee. We're going to read the 9th chapter in the Ministry of Ordinary Places. Chapter 9. It happened near the kitchen pantry cabinet somewhere around 3:05 p.m. on an average Monday. Silas had come home with a hitch in his britches about who knows what, so rather than smoothing him with kisses first as planned, I pivoted to Ruby, who was getting ready to pour herself a bowl of peanut butter Captain Crunch. Sugar cereal is a totally acceptable, peaceful resistance, in case you haven't heard. Friends under the age of 40, I'm here to warn you in advance about the pivot. It sounds innocent enough, doesn't it? Almost graceful, like something you do if you're resilient, emotionally flexible, and vaguely athletic. Unfortunately, I rival the athleticism of a block of Parmesan. I resist last-minute changes, and when I tried to sub Ruby in as my first hug of the afternoon, I threw my back clean out. I thought I'd thrown my back out before, but now I know the other times were only drills. Now I scoff at the younger me with her thrown out back. I shrieked, clutching my lower spine, and somehow hobbled to my bed, where I tried to laugh it off with the kids in a shaky attempt at delusion. I told myself if I just lay flat for a few minutes with Siley's Minions ice pack, I would be fine. I would still make it to Bible study with my pan of brownies. Short story long, I was not okay. I did not make it to Bible study that night, nor did I make it anywhere other than to the edge of despair for the next 4 days. I could not sit. I couldn't get comfortable in bed. Corey practically had to carry me to the bathroom, and I usually cried on the return voyage. Hand to heart, I worried I had fractured my spine. I thought the pivot might have triggered a spontaneous, undiscovered form of cancer, and it was already metastasizing. Haunted by the thought of a novel I'd read years ago about a young girl whose mother was in an iron lung for her entire childhood, I imagined my kids feeding me orange slices 2 or 10 years in the future, showing me grainy pictures of all the events that I had missed. Late into the night I moaned, I don't know what to do, only interspersing it with an occasional blanket apology. I'm sorry. I'm not even sure who I was saying it to. Corey? Myself? Humanity? Never had my tea kettle, my good humor, or my out-of-state family felt so far from reach. On day 3, I posted a picture on Instagram referencing my situation in passing. More than anything, I was paying tribute to Corey. His annual jail ministry banquet was set for the following day, which made it the busiest week of his year. And that's without taking into consideration that he was left doing every solitary thing around our house, for our children, for his vegetative wife. His plates were spinning, and I, the most fragile of all, was profoundly grateful. 20 minutes after publishing the post, a comment popped up from Lydia, a local woman I'd only met once before. Can I bring you dinner tonight? These 6 words undid me. My instinct was to message back, we're fine, but thank you for offering. We've already discussed my natural, prideful aversion to receiving help. But then I failed at rolling from my left side to my right side without assistance, and I remembered that nothing about me, us, the contents of our refrigerator, the number of hours in Corey's day, or the relentlessness of my kids' hunger was fine. I wrote back, dinner would be a huge blessing. I'm speechless over here and also crying. Despite my insistence that we're easy to please and I didn't want her to go to any trouble, she arrived later that evening bearing a stack of magazines, a gourmet meal, a homemade cake with a separate little jar of freshly toasted coconut. If it took throwing out my back to finally live my childhood bread and jam for Frances fantasy, with all her fancy side dishes, toppings, and extra creature comforts, it was almost worth it. The point is not that she brought smashed ginger carrots with lime, the most delicious Brussels sprout salad this side of Eden, but that she revealed herself as one of my people at a time when I needed support most. Lydia was only the beginning. When my family first dove into neighborhood life, we weren't prepared to fall head first into a pit of deep loneliness. It's a confusing beast. More than ever before, our lives were in the thick of the lives of other people. Our house was full and loud. We were learning what it meant to live with our door easy on its hinges. It felt some days like there were people everywhere. But our bodies were weary and our hearts felt unattended to. In a brand new place, we were without close connections built on sustained history. I was surprised by how long we would feel adrift. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who spent years in the desolate confines of a prison cell, wrote, "It's Christ's will that man should be thus isolated and that he should fix his eyes solely on him." Sometimes following Christ means our relationships might be chipped up and even shattered. It means a measure of rejection. This rational exile hovering just past our reach is one of the ways we're bound to suffer. God allows us to feel the occasional burn of isolation, not only because He wants to rescue us, but also because often, in order to recognize the ache of those around us, we first have to feel it ourselves. And so we waited it out. We relented to the inevitable pruning of our personal relationships. We watched some things die and gave ourselves permission to really feel the loss. We drew nearer to each other and uncovered a better understanding of the nearness of God. Then, just when we were beginning to get cozy in this strange relational atmosphere, other lonely humans began to emerge from the landscape, taking us by surprise. Our people were right here, hiding in plain sight. Relief arrived a little at a time, a leaky faucet dripping onto parched earth. And then, the week of my spinal discontent, the floodgates opened, gushing compassion. It's also possible the love had been there all along, and it took being benched on the sidelines of my own life to really see it. For days I had despaired that I might miss the jail banquet, certifiably one of my favorite nights of the year. It was a race against time, and I tried to remain optimistic, but I wouldn't have to be carried in by 2 former inmates. The forecast, however, looked grim. This unwelcome state of utter dependence had completely unhinged my pride. I felt useless, scared. My Ziploc ice pack of frozen peas had turned into a demoralizing paste. Twitter, my only companion during school hours, was busy feeding me its usual steady stream of global outrage. The kids prayed fervently for my healing, wondering out loud why God wasn't doing anything about it. And then I felt myself being lowered through the roof. It wasn't instantaneous as I had hoped. It didn't happen like it did in the church of my childhood, where if the afflicted mustered up enough faith, healing would descend from the rafters, knocking people over and making folks dance. No. The Spirit of God blew into my home, and my heart through His ordinary kids, the ones He had named as my neighbors. Some of my saints and angels were people the church might have judged for various perceived offenses. To that I have learned to say, the church does not deserve them. And here's how the healing happened. My friend Kim, a woman I met the week we moved to town, showed up, laced my shoes on my feet, helped me hobble to her car, and drove me to the chiropractor. She didn't comment on my woeful physical state or even shoot any pitying glances my way. Instead, she made me laugh, stuck around for a while after she brought me home, cluing into the fact that I craved meaningful human contact, and helping herself to a donut. Jennifer, a woman who entered our lives several years ago when we temporarily cared for her granddaughter, sent me this text message. I saw on Facebook your back is out? I have a great massage lady who does house visits. Can I send her to you tomorrow? I'm paying for it. Love you. Lisa, who at the time lived in the neighborhood work release center, walked over to check on me during 1 hour of free time she had that day. Once here, she made a pot of coffee for herself, kept me company in my favorite way by sharing the mundane details of her ordinary life. Later that evening, I realized she had somehow, with the stealth of a street magician and at the speed of sound, folded the load of clean laundry that sat ignored in my laundry room for days. Becca, my favorite coffee shop companion, showed up unannounced with hot chicken soup from the deli, chips and salsa, a loaf of cranberry bread, each item a testament to her keen attention to relational detail. While my banged-up body was being mended by God Himself, my hope was being restored by the miracle of unlikely community He had so lavishly and unexpectedly poured out on me. A handful of years ago, I didn't know any of these women. Our lives intersected in some of the strangest and most haphazard ways. None of us perfectly align on paper. Yet they were the actual physical presence of God at a time when I was at my lowest. They scooped me up, and for profoundly personal ways, they saw my need and did tangible, unfussy things to relieve it. Ordinary deeds made extraordinary. Water turned to wine. Their breezy generosity leveled me. One of the things I'm asked about most often is how my family found our people. Here's how. We continue to study our corner of the world. We find others near us wanting the same thing we do. Voila! Our people. We can stop searching for the perfect fit. Instead, we can look around for the people already living near us and taking them, as they take us, as is. The truth is, my family is only now identifying who our people are. And the hobhodge list of taking shape never fails to make us smile. Loneliness is still part of our mission, and I know God wants it that way, but we aren't alone. He keeps showing up, disguised as a loner, a struggler, an outcast. He arrives in the shimmering middle of everyday life. His abundance most often crops up right in the middle of our lack. Is it too much to imagine a life where help and companionship are literally just a door or two away? A friend of mine recently confided that she struggled to love or even just plain like one of her nearest neighbors who happened to have large, unruly dog prone to mayhem. Over the years, she kept her distance, entertaining unkind thoughts about the dog and its owner. Though she was far too lovely a woman to act on any mean-spirited fantasies, she allowed herself to believe she didn't owe them the time of day. That's all there was to it. Then, unspeakable tragedy rocked my friend's family. They were flattened by the sort of grief that seems to know no end. Would you like to guess who drew near to them in unexpected mercy? Emotionally bloodied and beaten on the side of her Jericho road, she was hoisted up and carried to safety by the one she least expected. The one, in fact, she believed was her suburban enemy. The world would not feel so impossible if each of us committed to truly knowing 5 of our nearest neighbors. We wouldn't feel so alone if we would commit without expectation to the big-hearted drifters nearest us. This flies in the face of church small groups commonly arranged by demographics and shared interests. But I promise the results can be a diverse reflection of God's kingdom. It's not similar social economic status, life experience, or theological positions that bind us after all. Rather, it's basic proximity and the inevitable nomad status known eventually by every one of us. God's sacrifice is made evident through the willingness of His children to recognize one another as eternal family. All of its certain beauty, and I'm not so sure anymore that these are even ashes. It's the end of chapter 9. Chapter 10 is Nachos by the Hour. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you're enjoying this book. I absolutely love it. I'll talk to you later. Bye.